Hey, what's up, Ultimate Entertainment Nexus? I actually do have a a new thumbnail. I'm going to try for my a new thumbnail and a new title and a new description. And one more thing, Wansee Entertainment actually did come out with a new video. Wait. Yeah. This is 6 stories. 6 animated stories. Okay, guys. Tell me in the comments below which story you want. And about I'm doing something new because frankly Kaba won't change the thumbnail. So yeah. So I'm doing a new thumbnail. So you guys will see my new thumbnails constantly this time. Let's start.
This is something I experienced when I was working as a police officer in my early 30s. One night, a man called 911 screaming for help, and I responded right away. When I arrived at the alley with my colleague Daniel, a man's moans rang out like an echo. We entered the alley and saw a terrible scene. The person who reported it was already dead. His body was horribly mutilated, and a man was sitting on top of him with his face and hands covered in blood. He looked at us and said, "Don't come near me. You too will become a piece of meat like this." Then his mouth opened wide and he covered his mouth with both hands. He looked as if he was trying not to open his mouth and was trembling as if he was putting a lot of pressure on his hands. He shouted something, but I couldn't hear what he was saying because he was covering his mouth. The veins protruding on his forehead looked as though they might burst at any moment. I looked down at the dead body and parts of him were missing. I assumed that this man had eaten part of a dead man's body. I slowly brought my trembling hand to the pistol. Then, suddenly, the hands he was holding over his mouth fell, and his mouth opened incredibly wide. The bones in his jaw joints sounded like they dislocated and were crunching, and he screamed out very loudly, "Please stay away from me! Very far!" I could feel a horrifying mix of agony and rage in his voice. I covered my ears because I felt like my eardrums would burst. Then he crawled on all fours with his mouth wide open and lunged at us. I jumped back and fell over. Then he pounced on my colleague Daniel, got on top of him and shouted, "I guess I should eat all 3 of these. I'm so lucky to eat today." He started moving like a deranged animal and biting Daniel, which was enough to make me quickly take out my gun and shoot him in the leg. But he didn't stop even after being shot. I shot him again in the thigh and he finally fell to the ground, screaming. He squirmed and moved his limbs grotesquely like a spider stuck on its back. His mouth was overflowing with saliva. The shocking sight made me panic and my whole body was shaking. After a while, he passed out and I collected myself to call an ambulance. Daniel was also taken to the hospital and treated. The crazy man woke up the next day in the hospital, but he had no memory of what had happened. His eyes and voice had changed. It was like he was a completely different person. But when I asked him, "Why on earth did you do that?" he said, "There's something terrible living inside me. He whispers to me every day. He wants to eat something alive, not the dead meat sold in restaurants." He continued with a terrified look on his face and his hands clutching the bedsheets. "Every time I go out on the street, I hear his voice in my head. He says people look really delicious, and he asks me to eat with him. He says he has to hunt and asks if he can use my body for a while, and I keep tasting a certain taste. I definitely don't recognize the taste, but it feels like something I've had before. My mouth starts watering. Every time that happens, I feel so much pain that I tear my hair out and scream. But there are times when my willpower vanishes and I become completely helpless. There are times in people's lives when they feel really hungry, right? At those moments, I completely lose control of my mind. And when I came to my senses again, my mouth was full of the smell of blood, and my stomach was so full that it was difficult to breathe. Then I realized I ate something, but I don't remember what I ate at all. What should I do? I was speechless. Since he told me that he had lost his memory several times, I made several attempts to help him recover his lost memories by calling in a hypnosis expert. However, every time he was hypnotized, he screamed that he had become a monster and then fainted. In the end, I couldn't find any more victims, but I think there are more victims out there that haven't been found. He ended up in prison, and although a long time has passed since then, even now, I sometimes think of that moment when he crawled towards me with his mouth open so wide that his jaw was detached. When I remember it, my whole body trembles. Due to the trauma from that case, I had to quit being a police officer and am now living as a normal civilian.
I was bullied by superheroes. Surprise? In my world.
Trauma from that case, I had to quit being a police officer and am now living as a normal civilian. Hello, Wansee. My name is Obeyed. I've been watching your videos for the past few days, and I want to share my story. This story is from when I was 14 or 15. The year was 2016 or 17. My brothers and I were all in our teens, and we were attending a birthday party for one of my mom's colleagues at an Asian restaurant located in a quiet area of the city that they're familiar with. It was probably 11 p.m., and we were getting ready to head back home, but my brother wanted to buy some candy in a small convenience store nearby, and my mom agreed since it was just in front of the restaurant. I went with him to shop while everyone else waited. As we walked in, my brother asked me to look at the candy and said he'd go look for some ice cream. So I went and checked if the candies were worth getting. He was gone for a minute, but then suddenly he ran up to me and whispered to me in a hurried and scared voice, "Drop everything, we need to leave." I was so confused and I didn't get what he meant, so he told me that he saw a dead woman's legs being dragged on the floor through the back door. For some dumb reason, I went to go look, but the door at the back of the shop was already shut, so I just turned around and ran back to the restaurant with my brother. I asked my brother to tell me exactly what he saw, and he said he would tell me on the way home. We finally went to the car, and my brother explained everything to me. He said that while he was looking at the ice cream, he heard the sound of something metal hit the floor, and then he saw two men dragging a human body through a door. He said the body was definitely a woman's. My brother tried convincing my mom, but she didn't believe him. But I know he wasn't lying or trying to pull a prank, because knowing my brother, he wouldn't abandon candy and ice cream for no reason, and he's not the type to pull pranks. To this day, I still can't stop wondering what would have happened if we got caught.
He wouldn't. Yeah.
Hey, my name is Justin. I'm a big fan, by the way, and I watch all of your videos. I'm not sure if this is the way to contact you guys about this, but I have a scare.
Yeah. Sorry, I paused it, but yeah. If I abandon candy and snacks and see two grown men, I'm getting the fuck out of there.
You can't give her the right kind of care.
Because that's my. Because. Or. Yeah, I would get the fuck out of there.
And if not her mother, certainly her
The
own grandmother. Think what's best for the child.
Story that happened when I was around 12 years old. I slept in the basement of my home at the time. To give the layout, you'd come down the stairs and turn right for the bathroom, turn left for the storage room and furnace room, and straight ahead was my room and the living room. One night, I was getting ready for bed after finishing some homework. This was around 1 to 2 a.m. I have severe insomnia, so I've always struggled to sleep, and this turned me into sort of a night owl. I genuinely enjoy the dark hours, spending nights gaming or reading. Anyway, as I was getting ready for bed, I felt an odd sensation. It was almost as if a ghostly chill passed through me, making me shiver. I shrugged it off and continued getting ready for bed. Once I was done and got into bed, I watched some videos on YouTube for a bit and then read my book. After about an hour of reading, I saw it was 3 a.m. and I finally felt tired, so I turned out the lights and closed my eyes. As I was beginning to drift off, I heard the shower door open. I had one of those standing showers designed in a quarter circle shape with a sliding door. It sounded like someone had opened the sliding door, so I propped my head up to listen. After about a minute of silence, I figured it was my imagination, so I lied back down. Suddenly, the shower door slammed closed so hard that I jumped up to the edge of the bed. My heart was racing. Right after that, I could hear some papers in the living room rustling around. I was far too scared to go check in the darkness, so I sat there frozen in silence. A few minutes went by and I managed to relax myself a bit. I turned my head in the direction of my open closet, and for a split second, I saw a ghostly face of a woman there. In the blink of an eye, it was gone. The face was terrifying. It had dark hair and wide, bloodshot eyes. It also looked as if it had something like a piece of cloth wrapped around its mouth. There was nothing below its chin that appeared for that second, only its head and face. I passed out from terror and woke up in the morning lying on the edge of my bed. I got up to find my homework papers had been tossed all over the living room, and when I checked the shower, it had a crack in the plastic, likely from it being slammed closed. Until now, I hadn't told anyone, as I knew no one would believe me anyway.
You wear these booty shorts around other men? They're too damn...
Hi, I'm Jody from Bangladesh. This is a story from 35 years ago. It happened to my grandfather. One night, my grandfather was returning home after buying 2 hilsa fish. Grandfather had to cross a bridge on his way back home, and as he was crossing the bridge, he heard a relative of his call out to him. The person who called out to my grandfather did not usually talk to him at all, so he was a little bit shocked. Then the man started to come forward on the bridge, and at one point, that man put his arm on my grandfather's shoulder and started saying something. When the man put his arm on my grandfather's shoulder, grandfather could smell a very rotten stench coming from him. My grandfather also noticed that he couldn't feel any weight from the man's arm. They were standing along the middle of the bridge when grandfather noticed that the man's legs were even missing, and he was floating in the air with his arm on my grandfather's shoulders. Then grandfather realized that this man was a ghost in the guise of his relative. At that moment, the ghost started laughing and looked at the fish in grandfather's hand and said,
"Give me the fish. I will eat them."
That's when grandfather started reciting prayers, and the ghost started screaming and said,
"If I see you another day, I will kill you before you can recite any prayers."
It was a famous ghost in our country whose name is Mekoboot. It was said that if the ghost saw someone with fish at night, he would scare them and take their fish. If the person did not let Mekoboot eat the fish, the ghost would even kill them.
Okay.
I would like to tell you my horror story, which happened last year when I was 15 years old. For privacy reasons, I want to remain anonymous and don't want to reveal my name or the names of my friends from the story. The story begins one rainy day when I was watching a movie with my best friends at night. We will call them D and M. Since we live in the same neighborhood and it was thundering and raining outside, they stayed the night with me at my grandmother's house, since my grandmother has a big house with 2 empty rooms. Both of my friends, who are also brothers, suffer from bipolar disorder. Before we were supposed to go to sleep, D and M had an argument and did not want to sleep together in the same room. So M decided to sleep in the living room on the couch. At night, there was a lot of thunder and lightning, which made it hard for me to sleep. But around 3 a.m., when everything finally calmed down, I occasionally heard strange sounds, like scratching and whining. I decided to get up and go to the kitchen to drink some water. I cautiously took my cell phone and turned on the light as I walked to the kitchen. For a moment, I thought that I had imagined everything, but then I noticed that the door to the room where Dee was sleeping was open, but he had closed it when we went to sleep. Dee was a very tall boy with dark black hair and light skin, and so even though it was dark in the house, it was visible that someone was sitting on the bed facing the window. I approached the room, but when the lightning flashed, I got scared and turned on the light. I froze in place when I saw Dee sitting on the bed with a white, bloody sheet cutting his forearm. He slowly turned his head towards me, his eyes bloodshot and red. He looked like a demon had entered him. He said to me in a quiet and deep voice, "Get away from me. I really don't want to kill anyone." Those words pierced me. I stood motionless for a few seconds. I then slowly backed away and closed the door and locked it. I sat on the couch for half an hour thinking about what to do, when I suddenly heard a loud snap, as if something had broken. In fear, I woke Em up and called my grandmother, who was staying in the house next door, taking care of a sick neighbor. We quickly gathered our things and locked the house. We went to the neighbor's house, and my grandmother called the police and an ambulance. When they arrived, they found Dee unconscious in the room and took him to the hospital. The door of the room was bloody from scratches, and there was a broken crucifix on the floor. Dee survived and is now well and going to school. Since then, I have never again slept in the same house with Dee because I still fear what could have happened if I hadn't locked the door that night.
Another demonic possession?
Hi, my name is Kate. This story happened when I was 14 years old, and I was living with my mother and 3 siblings, Tia, Junior, and Mendez. We lived together in Slough, England, in a small house. Our house was pretty close to a very small park that had a slide, monkey bars, and just one swing that was supported by an old oak tree. Keep that in mind for later. Now, me and Tia loved going outside and doing things together all the time. And as her older sister, I happily obliged helping her get out of the house to have some fun. We got to the playground and noticed a girl sitting on the swing all alone. This was quite a surprise, as it was Monday morning, and no one ever went out on days like this. She had long black hair and heavy dark circles under her eyes. Her lips were crusty and nails uneven. She wore a cyan-colored dress that was ripped and dirty. Yet, she just sat there, looking at the ground with a sort of creepy smile. As someone who watched a lot of horror, I had a bad feeling about that girl as soon as I saw her, and planned to keep my sister away from her. But before I can get a word in, Tia had run to her in excitement, wanting to play with a new friend. From where I was standing, I can see an exchange of words was happening, and it looked all right as the girl smiled a normal smile, and the 2 girls started to play together. I sighed in relief and sat on a bench just scrolling on my phone, till a few hours later, I got a call from my mom, who told me it was time to come home. I called for Tia, and she said bye to her friend, as her new friend waved bye back and watched us leave the park. She had a wide grin on her face. I brushed it off and just wanted to get home. Tia then began to ramble on about her new friend as I held her hand on the way home. She told me that her name was Gloria, and that she also lived not too far from the park. That was interesting, as I never seen her around before, and I had lived in the area for a long time. But I thought, whatever, and decided not to think too much about it. We kept walking when suddenly I felt my sister let go of my hand and stop walking with me. I turned around, and she had turned around, and now was shaking and slowly turning pale. Her mouth was shut tight in horror. I looked a bit cross and walked over to her and asked what she was looking at. As I turned my head in the direction she was facing, what I saw made my blood run cold. A poster of the same girl we saw in the park was put up on a pole. She was wearing the same blue dress that she was wearing at the park. It stated "murder" on it and showed a picture of the girl with a number on it, which led to the parents. I thought, if the girl was dead, then who did we see at the park? I got home and my sister told my brothers about it, but they laughed at us and called us crazy. I ended up phoning the parents' number and found out that their daughter was found dead in that same park. Someone had beaten up and stabbed the little girl, then hanged her corpse from the oak tree with a swing on it. She was found dead 2 weeks ago. Tia and I were terrified after learning this new info and never went back to that park again. We moved out soon after this incident, but even after all these years, Tia and I cannot forget about this incident and the little girl in the blue dress.
What? 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 You.
There was a social worker in the house, Mr. Davis. He's on his way over here now.
You got to be kidding me. You mean Gloria was beaten and stabbed, then hanged from a freaking tree? Just a reminder, guys, I don't own this. This is owned by Wansee Entertainment. Man. I thought that if I saw a ghost, I'd get the fuck out. Have a good day, guys. Bye.